So let me share my screen. Confirm me, Pradeep, once you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
Pathru, I can able to see.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. And so API automation. So what is API? So when it comes to the full form, right? Application Programming Interface. So what actually the API is? So we will be having a server and we will be having a browser. So here we will be having a server and a browser where the user can access the application. Any web application, if you see, it can be any booking application or any respective. So we will be having a server where the application is hosted and we will be accessing that application through a browser. So what will happen in between these two? There will be a communication between the server and your user interface. So this interaction between the server and the UI application will based on the APIs, right? There will be a request sent, like whatever the action you want to perform on the browser, there will be a request sent to the server and that will respond back to the browser with a confirmation. So when you are submitting your any for suppose yesterday we have given you uh, survey like feedback survey form, and the form you have is like you will be seeing it on your browser, and when you submit each and every fields and you will get a response back, right? So which means like you are adding your response to my Google Sheets, because my whatever the server I am having is Google server, on top of which I shared the sheet with you. And whenever you submit the response, you are trying to add the data to the server, and in return you are getting a response that your response is submitted, right? So whatever we have in between is an API call. So what are the different operations we can do? See, either it can be a database or it can be an API or whatever it is, right? It will be kind of, we will be doing CRUD operations. So what is that? What is CRUD operations? Create, read, update, delete. So these are the four major operations we will perform on any of the application, any of the servers or any of the database. So either you will be creating a record, or you are reading the data, or you are updating the existing records, or you will be deleting a record, right? So what are the different methods we have in terms of API, right? For creation of the data, you have post request. Like you are trying to post a record to the server, right? Which means like when you are creating means you are trying to post it. And read, which is get request, which means reading is nothing but you are getting the data from the server. Update is put. Of course, you have patch or some other methods also, but majority of the times we will call out with the put request, which means you are keeping some data or you are updating some existing data or missing data into the application or a server, right? Delay. That is delay. So these are the four major methods we will be using in API automation. Not only in API automation, not only in API automation, in any of the application between the server and the user interface, you will be performing these actions. So whatever these communication is happening between this browser and the server, right? The same thing we are going to achieve through automation. So instead of entering the information from the browser, what we will be doing is we are directly interacting with the server. Whatever the communication between this browser and server is happening, the same we are going to perform using our UiPath, and that we call it as API automation. So there is nothing new we are doing. We are just simply replicating whatever is the communication between the browser and the server is there that we are performing through our robot on top of the server instead of and opening this application and manually entering the information or manually performing the tasks. So this is actually we call it as an API automation. So okay, fine. Now, when you open a browser, you will see the logins, right? You may need to log into the application in order to perform the actions. And sometimes that might not require any login also, right? So in the similar way, we have authentication. So whatever you are trying to authenticate, whatever the way you are trying to authenticate on the browser in order to access the server, the same we need to do in the API also. What are the different authentication methods we are going to have? No authentication, where the login might not be required for the application. Basic authentication, where you just may need to log in with the user ID and password. And you have OAuth, where we will be accessing the server with the help of client ID or client secret. So which is most recent days, like OAuth becomes very popular, OAuth and OAuth 2.0, as it is providing some better security to the server, right? So these are the different authentication methods we have. We have few more also, but majority of the cases we will be dealing with only these authentication methods. And nowadays, like a majority of the applications are going with OAuth 2.0, and we will see in our studio, like what are the other different types of authentications we have. And these are the authentication methods. So in order to perform any of these operations on top of a server, you may require these authentications. And that we will come to know how we are going to come to know, like how do we need to call it? What are the authentication methods? And what should be our endpoint? So here, along with the request and authentication, we will be having endpoint. Endpoint is nothing but URL where the resource is hosted. So for example, you have an application, let us suppose a booking application, and you'll be having a home page URL. When you are trying to book any ticket, right, there the URL will be changing. So whatever that URL we have, right, in the similar way, we will be having an endpoint for the URL in order to perform the API. And even the browser also will make the same endpoint request to the server. So that URL we need to have as an endpoint. So how we are going to get to know which endpoint we need to make the request, or what method we should use, and what is the authentication method? So for any application, we will have API documentation. So we need to have a look at that API documentation, and based on that, we will perform the API interaction with the server. So this application API documentation will have each and every in detail how to authenticate, and what is the endpoint, and what is the response or we will be getting based on the method we are calling API method, and what is the operation we are performing trying to do. And we will be having response codes. So this response code will be written to you in order to let you know that whether the request was successful or not. When we are trying to access the server and perform an action, then there should be in response, right? Like whether it is successful or a failure. For success, we have 200. And I think for unauthorized, in case if authentication is failed, I think 401 or something, and failed 400. So we will be having in this way. So accept 200, each and every other response is going to be our failures. And the reasons will be based on the response code, right? So this is how it is going to happen. Now, what are the different types of APIs? We have REST APIs, we have SOAP APIs, and we have Graph APIs. So the REST API is the basic API, very lightweight. So where we might not require a lot of heavy load servers or heavy load code is not required. It's a very lightweight API is the REST. And the SOAP API, we will be having a traditional or older way of API callings where we need to have a lot of complexity involved in a SOAP, right? But in terms of security, both are similar, but in SOAP, you'll be having more and more security. And the Graph API is for the modern applications. For example, if you go with the Google Workspace or Microsoft or Azure, or these will fall under the Graph APIs. So in this, we are going to deal with, in our session, we are going to deal with REST APIs because in majority of the cases for API automations, we deal with the REST API only. And so as of now, we are in UiPath, we are not supporting SOAP because very legacy applications, we have the SOAP APIs. And all the latest applications or web applications, anything we have is with the REST as of now. And in industry also, in very rare cases when you are working with a banking or finance and where they are using very legacy applications, there you may need to have the SOAP, but not in all the scenarios. And the Graph APIs, for Graph APIs, we have the modern applications of like Azure or Google Workspace or something, right? Like all these, we have already connectors available in UiPath. So as part of API automation, always we deal with the REST APIs. Okay. And what activities do we have in UiPath? HTTP request activity. So this request activity will make a REST API request to the server and returns us the response. Makes an API request to server and returns the response. Okay, so now we are talking about like making the call and getting the response back, right? Of course, we will be getting the response code, but in some scenarios, response code will not be good enough for us. And we need to capture the response message as well. And we need to deal with the response message and we need to get some information from that response message as well. So what it is going to return, whatever this HTTP request activity we have, that is going to return a string of JSON object. So whatever you are going to get based on the API call, the response message is a string of JSON object. So it will be in the schema of JSON object, but it is of a string. So what is JSON? JavaScript object notation. So how it is going to be there? It will be in the curly braces and we will be having so it will be in these formats, like you will be having one more, you can say in this way. So in case if you want to access this name specifically, so we cannot go with the string manipulations and all here. So we need to, this is a string because it will be in the form of string, right? But what we can do is we need to deserialize this object, which means we have a string and we are need to convert this into the actual JSON object so that we can access these values based on the key provided. So this is kind of key and value, because these will be fixed all the time for a given API and given API call request, sorry, a given API request. These will be always fixed and these are the changing parameters. So to get these values, we need to access with the help of these names. Okay. So for this, what we need to do is we need to deserialize JSON object. And then we are going to get in the JSON object format and we can access it. So before we go for this JSON, we will come one after the other. We will take an HTTP request and we will make an API call and we'll see the response code. And also we will see how we are getting the output and how we can access these values. Okay. And before we jump into the UiPath Studio, let me take up if we have any questions. Yes, we can say that key value pair, but the value is not always the value. It can be a JSON as well. Again. Okay, cool. Orchestrator HTTP request is just to make the API calls to the orchestrator API. It's specifically only for to make the calls to your orchestrator, not for the other APIs. Okay, endpoint. See, endpoint is nothing but where your service is hosted. Like under the server, you will be having multiple options, right? Like for adding of the data, you will be having one URL. And for reading of the data, you will be having one URL. Updating of the data, you will be having one URL. So we will be having different URLs in order to perform each of the tasks, right? So that URL, we call it as an endpoint. We can JSON format only for. No, see, key value pairs, we will be using dictionaries, but this is kind of similar to it, but we cannot strictly say that it's a key value pair because you'll be having JSON inside a JSON and we will be having JSON array. So multiple things you'll be having inside of a JSON. So we cannot call it as a key value pair, but it is similar to that because you are calling based on a fixed key, right? We can say nodes here. We will not call it as a keys. We call it as a node. Yeah, Rohit, I'm not pretty sure what you are trying to ask. Is this something related to your work or somewhere? Oh, sorry, in the forum. Okay. Pradeep will take it up. Got it. I'm sorry.
I'll take it, Patra.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to our UiPath Studio. But before we go for the studio, let me take some example. Request.in. So we can go to other also, but for now, I'm just going with this application where we will be having some fake data and we can perform all the API operations and we can see the responses. See the JSON, I said, right? Like we will be having array also, multiple JSONs inside of the JSON also. So these we call it as in nodes and these are the values. Okay. So let us see. We will perform the get request here. So to perform the get request, this is my base URL request request.in, and we have the add-on for we need to append this endpoint. See, for list of users, we have this is the endpoint, right? We doesn't have any authentication documentation here, so which means the authentication is not required here. And sometimes you may need to go with the API keys and all in order to make the authentication, but here it is no authentication. And here we have, this is going to be our endpoint and which we need to add it to the request.in because this is we can say partial endpoint based on the we need to append this to the base URL. Sometimes you will be having the entire endpoint. It depends on the API documentation. So let us go up here and let us take the HTTP request. So we have orchestrator HTTP and HTTP request also. If you see here, right, it is not giving me any icon or something, but if I hover over the HTTP request, it is saying that we need to install this package because the package is not available as of now, and it needs to be installed in order to get this activity to be used, and it will be under the UiPath.WebAPI.activities. So we need to install this package. We can install this either from the manage packages or directly by clicking here. So now we install the HTTP request. So now we can use it. So this is our activity where we will be making all of our API calls. Okay. And let us go to the configure. This is the configuration wizard, and request methods we have a lot, right? Get, post, put, delete, add options, patch, merge. So in majority of the cases, you will be using get and post. Other requests very rare and rare, and you may need to use the update and delete, but you will never use the other requests in majority of the cases. Okay, and here we need to provide the endpoint in order to work with the APIs. So what is our endpoint? And this URL. And this need to be added. What is happening? Okay, I'll open it in here. I'll get the entire URL. So we need to keep it in a double quote. Okay, and it doesn't require any authentication. So authentication method, we are keeping it as none, but you can simply see simple HTTP is the basic authentication, WAUth and WAUth2. So these are the different authentication methods we have, and parameters. If we have anything to be passed, so it will be given in the documentation only. In case if we need to pass in the parameters or headers, we will be having it in the documentation. So based on the documentation, we need to perform these actions. Okay. And attachments, we are not uploading anything or something because we are having the get. In case if we go for the post, add attachment, you can add it. So you will be going for the get, and this is disabled because for the getting of the data, we doesn't require the attachment. Okay. And now we given the endpoint, and before we execute this itself, we can click on preview. So it is giving us some data. And what we want to get from this is what is the total? We will try to get the data. What is total records we retrieve, and we will print each of the email. Okay. Hope this will be good enough for us, right? For each of the record, we will be taking the email ID. We can take the first name, last name. It is up to us, but we will take the email in the similar way. You can access the other values as well. Okay. So now we will be getting this total and this email from this particular response. If you see here, the status code is 200. So we got it. Let us suppose if I just remove let me try to preview it. Yes, I'm getting 200. Total page is 2. Okay. What I will do is I will remove this and I'll click on preview. See here, I got the status code of 400, which means I'm not getting any records from here. So in case if we are not giving the proper endpoint, then we will not get the proper. In case if it is unauthorized, like in case if the authentication is not correct, then also we will get some different error. So we need to look at this success code, and it needs to be always 200. Then only the API request is successful. Okay. Let us click on OK. And now we will be getting the output for response. Okay. So I'll just control here. Response message.
Uh, Hi Patru, sorry to interrupt you. Can you please little bit zoom out your studio?
Okay.
Thanks.
So the response message I'm giving as part of our properties. Okay. Now let us see what we are getting. So I'll just go with the log message. Response message. And let me run this. Output. So this is my text. So I got all the response data, and now I need to access each of these, right? So there is an activity deserialize JSON object. And here we are going to pass on the response message. Whatever the string we have, we are going to pass. And if you see this structure, right? See here, it is in the parenthesis. And we have the same structure, whatever we discussed in the JSON object, right? And we will have the JSON object. Response. Okay. And now we got the JSON object, and let us see. What is this? Page 2, right? And let me go here. Here we have. So we will try to get this value. Total.
Dot to string.
Yes, I'll be doing that. I'm just kept the key as of now. Okay. So let me run this. So we got that. But I want to print each and every email, right? So how can I get that? So what I will do is I'll go for each activity. And I'll go for object response and I'll go for data. So when I give this data, which means it is inside of my square brackets, which is nothing but an array. And I have each and every JSON object inside of it. So now from each object, I want to get the email. So I'll go for a log message. And let us run this workflow. So now we could able to access each of these emails. In a similar way, we can perform the post request also. If we come here, the post request is going to users and we need to pass in these values as a parameters. But before that, in the similar way, we are going to perform the post also. But I want to show you one more thing. How can we download even the files from a web application? See, when you click on this download Excel, it is getting downloaded your challenge.xlsx. So how can we perform this download using API? Okay.
Are you using URL?
Yes, similar kind of thing, but we are going to use the HTTP request in order to download. Okay. So we will go for use application or browser. and we will indicate this. We'll go to the properties, open if not open, close never. For time being, we'll just keep it as never. And now we'll go for the get attribute activity. And we will identify this download Excel button. Okay, confirm. And attribute, we will be selecting HRDF, which is nothing but the endpoint of that particular Excel file where it was hosted on the server. Even if you click on this also, it will be navigated to that order. When you click on inspect, see here, you have /assets/download files/challenge.xlsx, which means this is the endpoint where this Excel file is hosted. When you click on this button also, it will make an API call to the same endpoint in order to download this particular Excel. Let us do that from here. And control K, Excel file endpoint. Okay. And now we will go for the HTTP request. Configure. Let me not do the configuration or something because we are not passing the hard-coded values. In here, request URL. Excellent. And the request method is get. And we doesn't have any authentication, so we are not doing it. Okay. So here we will be giving the file name for the attachment. So what I will do is I'll go to this particular folder. Properties. Challenge.xlsx. So let us run this. Oops. Question could not be passed. Oh, okay, fine. The problem here is, I'll tell you. Excellent point. Fine. Here it is dot assets. We doesn't have the previous URL, right? So we need to remove this dot and then we need to append that with this particular RPA challenge. Not only dot and slash, but before that we need to get this URL. So I doesn't want to directly give this because there might be a possibility that you might be getting this in some of the other pages also, right? So we have get URL or something. Base URL. Let me see what we are getting in the base URL. Replace. I'll directly use the replace because we have the dot slash at only one place. Okay, let us run this. So we're getting it properly. So what I'll do is I'll just simply go to the home.
Will you please zoom in, sir?
Sorry.
Zoom in कर सकते हो क्या? Zoom in, please zoom in.
Can you see now?
Yes.
So here we got the actual URL, endpoint URL, right? I'm copying this. And now what I will do is I'll come to HTTP request. Now I'll just check based on the endpoint whether it is giving me correct or not. Keep on preview. Oh, sorry. I need to put this in the double quotes. Preview. See, the success code is 200 because it's an endpoint is an Excel file. So we are getting in this particular some random words and check this checkbox download resource. And I'll just keep this untitled.xls. Click on OK. So if I come here into the properties, see whatever we have given last time, file name for the response attachments, we are getting that place. And here we requested URL. Instead of having this, right, I'll directly put this value. So that even if we are working in a different page other than the home page also, it will work. Right now, let us run this flow. And let me open this folder. So it doesn't have any file. And let me run this. Let's come back. See here, untitled.xls, which means with the help of API automation, we can even download the files from a web application also. Instead of like only relying on clicking on download button and waiting and keep on checking whether the file is got downloaded or not. So we can go with the API automation also for downloading of the files. And in case if the application requires a login username and password, it will we just need to pass on the basic authentication. So that's how we can even download the files also. Okay. So this is how we are going to perform the API automation. So do we have any questions? Let me see.
Can you show that activities what you have used that variable type? Can you show once again that one? Only the activities.
These are
Yes.
string values.
No. Can you explain that one? The for get URL, what is that Excel name you are given? What is the pass input variable you passed output or what?
There is nothing. There is no input variable for get URL. See, wherever you are in the web page, it will get that particular URL of that web page.
Based on URL.
Yes. So now we are identified here. So we got that web page. In case if we are at this page, we are going to get this URL. So it will just return us on which page we are having and that URL we are going to get.
Now, actually, my doubt is why you used get URL. Already you used above one that URL, right?
Yes.
Browser you have used. So
Mm.
why this one you have used second one?
So if you come here and if I go to the inspect, right? So if you see here, it is giving that /assets and then we are getting the entire endpoint. But before this, whatever the URL we have is going to be in place of dot.
Gotcha. Okay.
Got my point? For that reason, even I can directly pass in this value, but I doesn't want to pass it because it can be in other pages also, right?
If we have the multiple Excels in the same position on that way.
Okay. So if we go to the HTTP request, here you have file attachment. So you will be getting it as a file objects, list of file objects, and you can save each of the file in the latest.
Same like inspector, we have to go whatever we have, same that we need to pass here.
Yes. No. That is endpoint, right? In the request URL, we will be passing that. But in terms of files, whatever we are going to retrieve, right? We have the file attachments. This is going to be the list of file objects. And for each file object, you can save it separately. Got it?
Okay.
Bring into data table if endpoint contains data information. I want only those tables. See, when you are having the endpoint as a tables, it will not return into the table at any point of time. The HTTP request will return you either in a JSON format or XML format, and you need to deserialize those, and you need to convert them to the respective objects. Either it's an XML object or a JSON object. In majority of the cases, it's going to be JSON, not the XML. HTTP response command, replace the file or throw error. It's a nice question. I did last time, but I didn't remember. So we already have the file, right? Let us run it. Hopefully it will replace. It replaced. It just. How to know that if an API having any authentication method or not? Yeah. So as I said, right, like we will be having the documentation here. Here there is no documentation for the authentication. And let me go to API documentation. If I come here to the Jira application API documentation, it is giving the authentication and authorization. So it is giving the documentation that how we can authorize or authenticate to the documentation. So each and every API documentation, we will be having this clear indication that what type of authentication we have and how to authenticate. And in case if we need to get the details of API key or some other passwords or secrets or something, we will be getting it from the documentation only. See here, this is having the basic authentication, and also we have OAuth 2.0. Okay. You have any other questions? Like we are just 10 minutes left. What is the use of deserialized JSON? See, when we are getting the response here in the HTTP request, we are getting it in a string value where we have parentheses and multiple values and all. And it is not possible for us to get the value out of it, whatever the required value. It is very hard for us to do a string manipulations in case if we have similar and indexes and all these things will be much more complex. And when you do the deserialization, it's very easy that you can just simply directly access with the node names. What are the nodes we have? So here we have the different nodes, right? So based on these names itself, we can get the values. So that is the advantage of deserializing a JSON object.
Output of HTTP request is what type?
It's a string of JSON. Like
Okay, that's why we can use deserialize.
Sorry.
So it's a string type of JSON, right?
Yes.
So that's why I have used deserialized JSON, right?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Could you show the text file where you explain this concept? See, I can show this and we will be uploading this to the Git as well. Can we get the captcha using API? See, don't ever try to access the captcha or crack the captcha. It is completely illegal and unethical. How to know the nodes available in the response? See, the response object schema is already always fixed. Whenever the response the HTTP or like the API is there, right? That response nodes are already fixed, and you'll be finding those response nodes in the documentation itself. And it is not necessary that to make dynamic, because always all the nodes, whatever is available, it will be part of your documentation. No. Don't get into the capture cracking. Explain different authentication modes in real time. scenario. See, whatever I have seen, right? Majority of the cases, it's basic authentication. In majority of the cases, it's not WAUth. WAUth is very less. I have used, and in my real-time projects, that is majority of the times it is purely we are just giving passing a API key. There is no legal way to do the captcha. We should not get into the captcha cracking. Guys, please stop asking questions on captcha. I doesn't want to talk more on the captcha because the captcha is intended to restrict the robots to access their web applications or their servers, right? So in case if that can be crackable, then what is the advantage of having the captchas? Yes, 99.99% the request response is always JSON, and very rare cases, but I have never seen there is a possibility of XML also. But majority of the cases, in my experience, I have seen the output response is always JSON. Yeah, Tejaswini, do you want to ask something? Okay. So Pradeep, over to you. Like there are some questions on the
Yeah,
forum challenge.
Yes, please, Partha. So I got one of the query regarding the forum. I got the screenshot also, so I'll communicate with the forum managers regarding that, and I'll get